Millennials and home ownership. They go together like oil and water, or like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. Meep meep. Which is to say that they don't really go together at all. The only thing anyone ever seems to want to talk about today is how home ownership has become so out of reach and so unaffordable for millennials, Gen Zs, and the younger generations still to come. So let's talk about that. While it's true that there are a lot of people who seemingly can't afford to buy a home, the truth of the matter is that there are young people buying homes every single day, so it is still happening. The question is, what is separating those who can from those who can't? In all fairness, we do hear a lot of stories about young people managing to buy homes because they've been gifted a down payment by their parents, or their parents have co-signed their loan for them, or in some more extreme cases, their parents own businesses and were able to employ them in six-figure salaried positions straight out of high school or even straight out of college. And that all sounds lovely, but it's just not reality for most of us. It's certainly not reality for me. Can you imagine being gifted a down payment for a house? Like, holy shit. I myself managed to become a homeowner for the first time at the age of 26, and I did it alone on a single income in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world. And I can tell you straight up that I did not receive a down payment gifted to me, but man, would that have been nice. I also did not get a cosigner on my loan, and I absolutely was not making six figures. In fact, I'm still not making six figures. I never have. But there was one privilege that I was afforded. One thing that gave me a huge step up, which allowed me to get into the position that I was able to get into, and that is education. See, here's the thing. I grew up in a low-income household. I was raised by a single parent, and we never really had an abundance of money for anything. I'll say that I wasn't homeless or hungry at any point, but I know that a lot of sacrifices had to be made to ensure this. I never went to university or college. I never received any sort of credential or qualification or education beyond a high school diploma, but even still, I decided very early on that I was going to be a homeowner at some point. And it wasn't a matter of if, it was just a matter of how quickly I was going to make it happen, but I was determined I was going to make it happen. Mathematically, it made no sense. When I finished high school, I started working various retail jobs and never really made more than $30,000 in a year. But despite all of that, I was very lucky that at an early age, when I was very young, I was taught the value of money and more specifically, the importance of saving it. I think that when you grow up poor, you wind up becoming one of two types of people. Either the type of person who as soon as you start making your own money, you decide that you're going to treat yourself to all of the things you always wanted but could never have because you felt deprived your entire life.
Okay, we're young, rich, and full of sugar. What do? Let's go crazy Broadway style!
Or like me, you wind up with a scarcity mindset and you wind up becoming a natural saver, believing that because money never has been abundant in your life, it never will be, and always worrying that every dollar is going to be your last, so you have to save it. And in truth, neither of these extremes are particularly healthy or productive, but I've seen them play out many, many times. I was never taught about complicated financial matters. In fact, there's a lot of that stuff that I still have absolutely no idea about today. I was not even taught about investing because in the environment that I grew up in, we didn't have any extra money that could be invested. In fact, I think to this day, my mom still believes that investing is the same as gambling because she never had any extra money to invest, so she never had an opportunity to learn about it. And of course, she couldn't teach me what she didn't know. But the two things that she did teach me was number one, save more than you spend, and number two, avoid going into debt by whatever means necessary. I took those two lessons very much to heart, and I used them as the foundation to be able to get myself what I wanted in life, which in my case was a house. The basic path that I followed that allowed me to buy a house is actually pretty simple and straightforward. And I'll say right from the jump here, I'll acknowledge that there are certain people who come from certain extenuating circumstances in difficult situations that would definitely prevent them from being able to do this. And I know that, I know those people exist, and I want to absolutely recognize them. But I would say that there's an even larger group of people who had the same opportunities I had in life, or even better ones, and squandered them because they didn't know any better. And those specifically are the people I want to address. Here is the TLDR of how I managed to buy a house. As I mentioned, I finished high school and started working. I got a retail job, and I worked as many hours as I possibly could. In fact, in most cases, I had at least 2 jobs, or a job and a side hustle, or 2 jobs and a side hustle. I said yes to every shift I was offered. Basically, I just worked as much as I possibly could. Because from my perspective, I wasn't in school, I wasn't doing anything productive with my time other than working, so I might as well just be working and earning as much money as I can, right? I stayed living at home for longer than I would have liked to, and certainly not for free. I was contributing financially, I was helping out around the house, but it definitely cost me less to live there and help out with the bills than it would have had I got my own apartment. For anybody who doesn't have this option, renting with a couple roommates will probably get you roughly into the same financial spot that I was in. I bought a cheap car, I insured it, I put gas in it, I was financially responsible for all of my pets, and I set aside a small amount of money for entertainment and fun, but beyond that, I saved pretty much every dollar I made, and that worked out to be probably 50% or more of my income. Now this right here is the part of the story where things start to go sideways for a lot of people. You're 18, 19, 20, whatever, you're working, you're making your own money, you have no responsibilities, and now you just have this money sitting in your account that you can do whatever you want with. So in a lot of cases, people start to ball out. They shop, they travel, they spend, sometimes more money than they're even making. They start getting themselves into credit card debt. They buy a brand new car. They go out to eat constantly. And I kind of understand when you're that young, thinking ahead to being in your 30s or 40s seems like a lifetime away, and it doesn't seem like there's any point in worrying about that at that stage. But the truth is that you have to. Without the understanding of things like credit cards and compounding interest and what those things actually mean and how they actually affect your life and your finances, a lot of people wind up digging themselves into deep holes of debt that will take them a very long time to get out of.
How are you gonna get out of here? We'll dig our way out.
But then a few years pass and you're 25 or you're 30 and now you start thinking about your future a little more seriously and thinking about maybe wanting to buy a house, but you can't because you have no money saved up and you have a bunch of debt you haven't paid off yet and you're paying an expensive ass rent that won't even allow you to save up enough money by the time you pay your rent and your minimum monthly debt payments, and you're in over your head, and now what? But because of the financial education I had, I was able to understand credit cards and the importance of paying them off in full every month. I knew to not be wasteful with my money and to carefully consider every purchase before I made it. I had the foresight to ask myself what I wanted for my future, what I wanted the next 5 to 10 years of my life to look like. And when I decided that a house was what I wanted, I recognized immediately that I had to start prioritizing saving as aggressively as possible. And I made a whole separate video about this about like 2 years ago. I'll link to it up here and in the box down below as well. But essentially, by the time I was 25, I managed to save up over $100,000. And because I had no debt, my credit score was excellent. And then by just being a little bit flexible with my location, those three things combined allowed me to buy a house. And yes, I completely agree that it is a ridiculous and quite frankly impractical notion to suggest that 17, 18, and 19-year-olds should start planning that far ahead for life. But unfortunately, it's just the reality of the situation we're in. And realistically speaking, isn't that what everybody does anyways when they take on 5 figures of student loan debt for a degree at 18 years old? It's pretty much the same thing. The situation we're all stuck in, it sucks, and everything is really expensive, but all we can really do is work with the system we have for the time being at least, and that is the reality of the situation. That's what you have to do. You have to start planning early, you have to be educated, and you have to know what you want so you can start working towards it. And I will never be the person, by the way, who suggests that a $5 latte is the reason you can't afford to buy a house. But the mentality that allows you to buy that $5 latte is a big part of the problem. The idea of, well, I can't afford a house anyway, so YOLO, might as well buy what makes me happy. That mentality is the problem. The latte is not the issue, going out for brunch is not the issue, buying the new shoes is not the issue. The mentality that allows you to do all three of those things together is the issue. Most of my peers had the exact same opportunities afforded to them that I had, or even better opportunities. Most of them were living at home, a lot of them totally for free. Most of them had jobs and were sometimes earning more money than I had. But they spent all that money because nobody taught them not to. Nobody taught them how credit cards rob you and how the decisions that you make today will affect your life tomorrow and next week and next month and next year and 5 years and 10 years down the road. That $100,000 that I earned and saved is the same $100,000 that a lot of people earned, but they spent it little bit by little bit without even realizing it. They spent it at the bar every weekend. They spent it going on vacations they couldn't really afford. They spent it on a brand new car. They spent it on eating out at every single meal, and those little microtransactions added up faster than they could imagine. How many people do you know who by their 20s have $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000 worth of credit card debt and a car that's worth $20,000 or $25,000 that they financed? When I was in my 20s, that was pretty much the life story of everybody I encountered, of all of my friends. That is what is seen as normal by today's standards, but it shouldn't be. Because by the time you pay off that credit card and that car loan, that in itself is like $50,000 or more, just completely gone into thin air. Depending on where you live, that 50 grand can be a good chunk towards or even the entire down payment for a home, because I know that not everywhere is as expensive as Toronto is, and there's plenty of places where houses are still $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000, and that's a pretty good amount of money to put towards that. I think the real blame for this falls onto our education system. Of all of the useless shit in the world that they taught us while we were in school, how could they gloss over teaching us about compounding interest and budgeting and managing our money and mortgages and all of the things that at some point we're all gonna have to deal with in life? The idea that families or that parents should be the ones teaching their kids about money is completely absurd because it makes the sweeping assumption that they even have this information available themselves. How many of you grew up in households where your parents lived paycheck to paycheck or had massive credit card debt or bought everything on finance? For a lot of people, that is normal, and if your parents don't have that information, how can they even teach you what they don't know? These are things that we need to be learning in school. But at the risk of sounding like a conspiracy theorist, and by all means, fold me a tinfoil hat if you want to, but I think this is all deliberate. Teaching kids about financial responsibility early on is a great way to ensure that they don't buy things they don't need, that they don't get themselves into money trouble. It's a great way to prevent them from becoming mindless consumers. But if excessive and impulsive consumption stopped, the world's largest companies would fold. And then what would happen? Our entire economy and society as we know it would collapse, and what a shame that would be. I wish I could end off this video with a simple step-by-step process of how to unfuck your finances and get you into the home of your dreams. I really do. All I can say is that you probably can afford a home. Especially if you're coupled up, it's probably not as out of reach as you think. It's just that nobody gave you the education and the skills and the knowledge to know how to do it. Once again, our educational system dropped the ball on all of us. But hey, at least the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? But today we have the internet, and that has changed everything, because now every single piece of information ever discovered by mankind is readily accessible and available for free in the palm of your hand within seconds. There are so many amazing resources like YouTube and Reddit and all sorts of blogs and forums that can give you information on absolutely anything you want to know and can help you to fill in all the gaps of your education that you were never given before. If you want to learn how to increase your income, if you want to learn how to invest, if you want to learn how to qualify for a mortgage, if you want to learn how to fit a Costco-sized pickle jar up your ass, go online and look it up. All the information is there and it's readily accessible and it's free. Being financially privileged is probably pretty great, but it's completely out of your control. Being educated, on the other hand, is completely up to you. If you enjoyed this video at all, please go ahead and hit that like button and feel free to leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts on everything we just discussed. I'd love to know on a person-to-person basis what you were taught about money growing up. How did your parents approach talking to you about finances? Or did they? Maybe you came from a home where money was never spoken about and was very secretive. Let me know in the comments what your experiences were because I am so curious. Please also subscribe if you haven't done so yet. I'm trying to get up to 30,000 subscribers and we're getting very close and I appreciate every single one of you. You can follow me on Instagram at according_to_Nicole. You can check me out on Patreon. Links to everything will be in the description box down below. Other than that, thank you guys so much as always for watching. Take care and I will see you next week. If you want to learn how to increase your income, if you want to learn how to invest, if you want to learn how to qualify for a mortgage, if you want to learn how to fit a Costco-sized glass...